This presentation explores sensitive topics including cannibalism, violence, and historical trauma. It is intended for a mature audience, and viewer discretion is strongly advised. In the dead of a Canadian winter in 1879, a man stumbled out of the frozen wilderness and into a Catholic mission post. He was alone. His name was Swift Runner, a respected hunter and trapper from the Cree Nation. He was gaunt, his eyes hollowed out by a horror the missionaries couldn't yet comprehend. He told them a story of desperation. He said the winter had been brutal, the game had vanished, and his entire family, his wife, his 6 children, his mother-in-law, and his brother, had all starved to death. It was a tragic, but not entirely uncommon, story for those who lived and died by the unforgiving laws of the northern forests. But something about Swift Runner's story felt wrong. He looked too healthy, too well-fed for a man who had supposedly just watched his entire family waste away. The Northwest Mounted Police grew suspicious. They forced him to lead them back to his camp, deep in the woods. What they found there was not a scene of quiet, tragic starvation. It was a slaughterhouse. Human bones were scattered everywhere. Cracked open, the marrow sucked clean. Skulls were shattered. A small cooking pot still held the rendered fat of a human child. Swift Runner hadn't been a victim of the winter. He had been the predator. He had systematically butchered and eaten his entire family, one by one. When confronted, his confession was not that of a simple madman. He didn't just claim starvation drove him to it. He claimed he was possessed. A spirit had entered him, a malevolent entity that filled him with an insatiable, roaring hunger for human flesh. He gave that spirit a name whispered in terror around campfires for 1,000 years. He called it the Wendigo. Swift Runner was tried and hanged for his crimes, but his confession left behind a chilling question that has haunted the North American continent ever since. Was he just a desperate man who committed an unspeakable act and used an ancient legend as his excuse? Or did he truly fall victim to something else? Something ancient, evil, and very, very real, that stalks the coldest, darkest corners of the world? That is the question we will unravel. Because the story of Swift Runner isn't an isolated incident. It is just the most famous chapter in the terrifying saga of the Wendigo, the cannibal spirit of Native American lore. To understand the Wendigo, you have to understand the world that created it. Imagine the Great Lakes region, the northern plains of the United States, and the boreal forests of Canada, long before modern settlement. Imagine winters so cold they could freeze the soul. Winters where the snow is piled so high it swallows the landscape, where the wind howls like a starving wolf, and every living thing is locked in a brutal struggle for survival. In this world, starvation wasn't just a possibility. It was a constant, lurking presence. It was the monster at the door. And it is from this primal fear that the Wendigo is born. It is not a creature in the typical sense. It is not an animal. According to the lore of the Algonquin-speaking peoples, the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Innu, the Wendigo is a malevolent spirit, a manifestation of corrupted human nature. It represents the ultimate taboo. It is the embodiment of excess, of greed, of gluttony, and most importantly, of cannibalism. The legend says that a Wendigo is not born, it is made. A human being lost in the woods and facing starvation might be forced to make a terrible choice. To survive, they might consume the flesh of another human being. In that moment of transgression, that act of consuming their own kind, they open a door. A spiritual poison enters them. They are transformed. Other stories say it can happen through sheer greed. A person who hoards resources while their community starves, a person whose selfishness outweighs their humanity, can also become a Wendigo. Their heart is set to turn to ice. Their spirit withers and rots from the inside out. They become a vessel for the hungry, evil spirit. And once the transformation begins, it is irreversible. The physical descriptions of the creature are the stuff of nightmares, and they vary slightly from tribe to tribe. But they all share a core of terrifying details. The Wendigo is impossibly tall and gaunt, its skin stretched taut over its skeletal frame, giving it the appearance of a walking corpse recently dug up from the frozen earth. Its skin is often described as ashen gray or yellowish, pulled so tight that its bones jut out at sharp, unnatural angles. Its eyes are pushed deep into their sockets, glowing with a cold, malevolent light, like hot coals buried in ash. But its most defining feature is its mouth. Some legends say it is lipless, its teeth yellowed and jagged, locked in a permanent, horrifying grin. Its tongue is long and pointed, and despite its emaciated appearance, it is never satisfied. The Wendigo is defined by a hunger that can never be sated. The more it eats, the larger it grows. And the larger it grows, the hungrier it becomes. It is a walking, breathing paradox of eternal, agonizing starvation. It is doomed to wander the forests forever, seeking more human flesh to devour, but never finding relief from the gnawing emptiness inside it. It smells of death and decay, a sickly sweet odor of rotting meat that precedes its arrival and lingers long after it has passed. This isn't just a monster story told to scare children. For centuries, this was a very real belief system, a way of explaining and enforcing the most important social rules. The Wendigo was a cautionary tale, a powerful warning against greed and selfishness. In a communal society where survival depended on sharing and cooperation, the ultimate sin was to take more than your share, to let your individual desire for survival override the good of the tribe. The Wendigo was the ultimate consequence of that sin. It was a way of saying, if you act like a monster, you will become one. But the fear went deeper than a simple morality tale. It manifested as a recognized medical condition, a culture-bound syndrome known as Wendigo psychosis. Documented by early explorers, missionaries, and psychiatrists, it was a terrifying affliction. A person, usually after a period of intense stress or starvation, would become withdrawn and melancholic. They would complain of nausea and a loss of appetite. Then they would develop an obsessive, overwhelming delusion that they were turning into a Wendigo. They would feel an intense, horrifying craving for human flesh, and would often beg their family members to kill them before they lost control and harmed someone. In many documented cases, if they weren't stopped, they would become violent, attacking and attempting to eat those around them. This creates a fascinating and terrifying gray area. Were these people suffering from a purely psychological break, their minds fracturing under the immense pressure of starvation and isolation, latching onto a powerful cultural symbol to explain their horrific thoughts? Or was this evidence of something more? Was the psychosis the first stage of the spiritual possession the legends described? The Algonquin people believed the latter. To them, this wasn't a mental illness. It was the first sign that the evil spirit had chosen its next host, and they had their own methods for dealing with it, methods that were often as brutal as the creature itself. Shamans and elders would attempt ceremonial cures, but if the person was deemed too far gone, the only solution was execution. It was seen as a mercy killing, a way to save the person's soul and protect the community from the monster they were about to become. The Wendigo is therefore so much more than a creature. It is a complex web of folklore, psychology, and the harsh reality of life in a brutal environment. It is a metaphor for the darkness that lies within humanity itself. The potential for greed and violence that exists when society breaks down and survival is all that matters. It represents the fear of what we might become when we are pushed to our absolute limit. And the stories suggest the Wendigo has an arsenal of supernatural abilities to ensure its victims are pushed well past that limit. It is said to be a perfect hunter, impossibly fast and strong, with senses so acute it can track its prey for miles. But its greatest weapon isn't its claws or its teeth, it's its voice. The legends say a Wendigo can perfectly mimic human speech. It can call out to you in the voice of a loved one, a crying baby, or a woman in distress, luring you away from the safety of your fire and deeper into the dark, frozen woods where it waits forever hungry. That voice. It's the most insidious weapon in its arsenal, because it's not just a random sound in the dark. It's a carefully chosen key, designed to unlock the deepest chambers of your heart. It's the sound of your lost child crying out from the blizzard. It's the voice of your wife, your husband, your brother, calling for help just beyond the tree-line. It exploits your love, your compassion, your instinct to protect. It turns your greatest strengths into your most fatal weaknesses. Every fiber of your being screams to run towards that sound, to save the person you love. But your mind, your rational, terrified mind, knows it's a lie. It's a lure, a phantom song pulling you out into the killing cold. And the most terrifying part? The longer you listen, the more convincing it becomes. The more you doubt yourself. Is it really the monster? Or are you letting someone you love die out there, alone in the snow? That hesitation, that single moment of doubt, is all the Wendigo needs. But the true horror of this entity goes far beyond a simple monster hunting in the woods. The Algonquin people understood something far more profound, far more terrifying. The greatest danger isn't always the monster that stalks you from the outside. Sometimes the monster is the one that grows from within. They spoke of a terrible affliction, a spiritual sickness that could infect the human heart and soul, a creeping madness born from desperation, isolation, and starvation. They called it Wendigo fever. It doesn't start with claws and fangs. It starts quietly in the mind. It begins with a deep, gnawing melancholy. A person who was once a vibrant part of the community becomes sullen, withdrawn, and morose. They retreat from the warmth of the fire, from the company of their family. They develop a strange and unsettling fascination with the cold, with the desolate, empty wilderness. They might be found staring out into the snow for hours, lost in dark thoughts. Then comes the rejection of normal food, the carefully preserved meat, the nourishing broth that could save their life. It suddenly tastes like ash. It becomes disgusting to them. Their stomach turns at the thought of it. At the same time, a new unspeakable craving begins to whisper in the back of their mind. A dark, intrusive thought that at first they push away in horror. The thought of human flesh. This is the turning point. The moment the spiritual sickness begins to manifest physically. The victim is plagued by horrific nightmares. They dream of cannibalism, of monstrous figures, of being lost in an endless frozen forest, consumed by a hunger that can never be satisfied. They wake up shivering, not from the cold, but from a chill that radiates from their very bones. Their friends and family see the change. Their eyes become distant. Their skin takes on a sickly, pale hue. They complain of a strange, sweet smell on the wind that no one else can detect. The smell of decaying flesh. As the fever progresses, the transformation accelerates. The human soul is slowly, methodically eaten away. The person they once were is hollowed out, replaced by a single, all-consuming impulse: hunger. Their lips might crack and bleed. Sometimes they'll even begin to chew them off in their maddening craving. Their heart, according to the lore, literally begins to turn to ice. They are becoming a vessel for the Wendigo spirit. And once that spirit takes full control, the final horrifying metamorphosis occurs. The body contorts and elongates. The bones stretch, the skin is pulled taut, sometimes tearing, revealing the skeletal frame beneath. The eyes sink deep into the sockets, glowing with a malevolent, cold light. The nails harden into talons, the teeth sharpen into points. The human is gone. In its place stands the emaciated, towering horror. The Wendigo. You might be thinking this is just a story, a dark fairy tale to scare children into behaving, a metaphor for the harsh realities of winter. But for many, this was terrifyingly real. And there is one case, documented and historically verified, that stands as a chilling testament to the horrifying power of this belief. The case of Swift Runner. Swift Runner was a plains Cree trapper and guide from Alberta, Canada, well known and respected by both his own people and the Hudson's Bay Company. In the winter of 1878, he, his wife, his 6 children, his mother-in-law, and his brother took shelter in the northern woods, far from any outpost. It was a brutal winter. The game was scarce and the family was slowly starving. When spring finally came, Swift Runner emerged from the forest alone. He looked gaunt, haunted. He made his way to the nearest Catholic mission, claiming his entire family had starved to death. He seemed racked with grief, but his story didn't add up. He looked too healthy for a man who had supposedly survived a winter of starvation when 8 others had perished. Suspicions arose among his wife's family, and they alerted the Northwest Mounted Police. The police, guided by the suspicious relatives, went to Swift Runner's winter camp. What they found there was a scene of unimaginable horror. The camp was littered with human bones, picked clean of all flesh. A small pot near the fire pit held rendered human fat. Skulls were cracked open, the brains scraped out. It was a slaughterhouse. Swift Runner hadn't just survived. He had feasted. Under interrogation, he confessed to everything. But he didn't confess to murder. He confessed to being possessed. He claimed a Wendigo spirit had entered him, driving him to madness, compelling him to kill and devour his own family, one by one. He described the insatiable craving, the loss of control, the horrifying acts he committed as if he were a passenger in his own body. He was tried for murder, found guilty, and hanged in December 1879. To this day, the story of Swift Runner is one of the most cited real-world examples of what people called Wendigo psychosis, a culture-specific syndrome where individuals develop an obsessive craving for human flesh and a fear they will become a cannibal. Swift Runner's story forces us to look at the Wendigo not just as a monster, but as a concept. It is the ultimate embodiment of a taboo, but it's also a powerful cautionary tale. The Wendigo spirit, in its purest form, is a symbol of greed. It represents insatiable hunger, not just for flesh, but for power, for wealth, for more. It is the spirit of excess. In a society where survival depends on cooperation, sharing, and communal well-being, the greatest threat is the individual who takes more than their share, who puts their own selfish desires above the needs of the group. This is a form of spiritual cannibalism, consuming the resources of the community until nothing is left. The Wendigo is what happens when that selfishness is allowed to fester and grow into a monstrous physical form. It is the personification of a society consuming itself from within. The hunger of the Wendigo is eternal because greed is never satisfied. No matter how much it eats, it only grows larger and hungrier. It is a walking, killing paradox. Its gaunt, emaciated form is a constant visual reminder of its starvation, even as it gorges itself. It is a black hole of want, a bottomless pit of consumption that threatens to devour everything: family, community, and ultimately itself. And it is frighteningly intelligent. It's not a mindless beast. It is a cunning hunter that understands human nature perfectly. It knows your fears, it knows your weaknesses, and it knows exactly what sounds to make, what tricks to play, to draw you out into the dark. So what happens when the tricks work? What do you do when you find yourself face to face with this skeletal giant? Its icy heart beating in its hollow chest, its sunken eyes fixed on you. How do you even begin to fight a creature that embodies the very essence of winter and starvation? The answer, terrifyingly, is that you probably don't. You don't fight it. You die. For the average person, stumbling upon a Wendigo in the frozen woods is not a battle. It's an execution. Your rifle is a pea shooter. Your knife is a toothpick. Its hide, stretched taut over its bony frame, is said to be harder than frozen oak, deflecting bullets and blades with ease. Its speed is unnatural, a blur of gray against the snow. It doesn't just hunt you. It plays with you, a cruel cat-and-mouse game in a labyrinth of dying trees, its chilling whispers echoing from every direction at once. It wants you to feel the icy tendrils of despair, the gnawing emptiness of hopelessness, because that is the seasoning it craves. Fear sweetens the meat, but it is not invincible. The legends, born from generations of terror, also carry with them the keys to survival, the desperate blueprints for destroying the indestructible. And they all point to one single critical vulnerability, a flaw in its very design, hidden deep within its skeletal cage. The Wendigo's heart is not made of flesh and blood. It is a solid, jagged shard of ice. This is the creature's core, the frozen nucleus of its insatiable hunger and its malevolent spirit. To kill the Wendigo, you must destroy its heart. The challenge, of course, is getting to it. This is not a task for a lone hunter. It requires a community. It requires a plan. And most importantly, it requires a shaman, a spiritual warrior who understands that this is not just a physical confrontation, but a metaphysical one. The most common and trusted method of destruction is fire. Pure, cleansing, all-consuming fire. The antithesis of the Wendigo's being. The creature is born of the cold, it is the cold, and so it fears the flame more than anything. A hunting party, guided by a medicine man, would prepare a great bonfire, a roaring furnace in the heart of the forest. They would use sacred herbs like sage and sweetgrass, the smoke not only serving as a spiritual ward but also, according to some tales, as a lure, an irritant that draws the creature out, enraged by the purity it represents. The goal is not to simply throw torches at it. The goal is to trap it, to force it into the flames. This is a battle of attrition and courage. Men would act as bait, drawing the monster into a prepared area, using their knowledge of the land to set snares and deadfalls, anything to slow its terrifying advance. The shaman would be chanting, praying, fighting a spiritual war on a different plane of existence, weakening the entity's hold on the physical world. If the hunters are successful, if they can force the beast into the inferno, the real horror begins. The Wendigo does not burn like wood or flesh. It thrashes and shrieks, a sound that can shatter a man's sanity, a noise that is said to be the sound of a blizzard given a voice. As its frozen body is consumed by the heat, the true target is revealed. The heart of ice. It must be melted completely. Even a small remaining fragment is said to be enough for the spirit to eventually reform, to grow a new body around its frozen core over seasons of cold and hunger. So the fire must be kept raging, stoked until nothing remains but ash and the memory of a nightmare. But what if you can't build a fire? What if you're caught in a blizzard with nothing but the weapon in your hand? Another, more direct method exists in some traditions, though it is far more dangerous. This involves a weapon of silver. Much like the European werewolf, the Wendigo is a supernatural entity, and silver, a metal associated with purity and the moon, is believed to be one of the few substances that can truly harm its physical form. A silver bullet, a silver knife, a silver-tipped spear. The idea is not just to wound it, but to use the silver to shatter the icy heart directly. Imagine the scene. The creature bears down on you, its claws like railroad spikes, its breath a cloud of frost. You have one shot. You can't aim for the head. Its skull is too thick. You must aim for the chest, for the hollow cavity where that frozen heart beats its slow, cold rhythm. If your aim is true, the silver will strike the ice with the force of a hammer blow, and the heart will explode into 1,000 glittering shards. The creature will collapse, its animating force extinguished in an instant, its body crumbling into a pile of brittle bones and dust. But if you miss, you won't have time to reload. Even after the creature is felled, the work is not done. The spirit of the Wendigo is tenacious, a spiritual parasite looking for a new host. The body, whether it's a pile of ash or a heap of shattered bone, must be dealt with carefully. The remains are often gathered by the shaman. The bones are broken. The ashes are scattered in different directions, sometimes buried in separate, consecrated grounds. The place of its death is purified with ceremony and prayer. Every precaution must be taken to ensure that the evil cannot take root again, because the ultimate weapon against the Wendigo isn't fire or silver. It's the community. It's the adherence to the old ways, the taboos that were put in place for a reason. The best way to survive a Wendigo attack is to never let one come into existence in the first place. It is a creature born from the failure of humanity, from the moment a person chooses to break the ultimate taboo for their own survival. It is a monster created by a monstrous choice. This raises an even more disturbing question. We've talked about how to kill the monster, this giant emaciated creature of the North Woods. But the Wendigo legend is not just about a monster that appears out of nowhere. It is a story of transformation, a story of a human being, twisted and corrupted by desperation and greed, into something else. So how does that happen? What is that final terrible line that a person must cross to begin the change? And once it starts, is there any way to come back? Can you kill the monster without killing the man who is still trapped screaming somewhere inside? To answer that, we have to go back to the deep, unforgiving cold of the northern forests. Back to a time when survival was a knife's edge, and one bad winter could mean the end of everything. The most common, the most direct path to becoming a Wendigo is born from the ultimate taboo. It begins with a choice made in the depths of starvation, when the fires have died, the last of the salted meat is gone, and the world has been silent and white for months. It's the choice to survive by consuming the one thing you swore to protect: another human being. This isn't just about food. It's a profound spiritual violation. In the worldview of the Anishinaabe and other Algonquin peoples, community is paramount. To turn on your own, to see a family member or a companion not as a person but as sustenance, is to shatter the most sacred bond that exists. It's an act of ultimate selfishness in a culture built on mutual support. And in that moment of transgression, a door is opened. The act of cannibalism, driven by desperation, creates a spiritual vacuum, a wound in the soul. And it's through this wound that the spirit of the Wendigo enters. It's described not as a sudden possession, but as a slow, creeping infection. The first taste of human flesh awakens a new kind of hunger, a craving that no other food can satisfy. It's a gnawing, insatiable void that grows from the stomach to the soul. The stories say that with this act, a shard of ice forms in the person's heart, slowly encasing it, freezing away their compassion, their memory, their love. Their humanity begins to leak out of them, replaced by a singular, monstrous appetite. They are no longer a starving person who made a terrible choice. They are becoming the hunger itself. But this is only the first path, the most visceral and easily understood. The lore speaks of another, more insidious way to become a Wendigo, one that doesn't require a single act of cannibalism. This path is paved with greed. The Wendigo is at its core a spirit of excess. It is endless consumption. Therefore, a person who is consumed by their own greed, who hoards wealth, who takes more than their share from the community and the land, who is never satisfied, they are walking the same path. They are inviting the same spirit. This person's hunger isn't for flesh, at least not at first. It's for power, for resources, for control. They are the trader who exploits a bad winter to charge starving families a fortune for food. They are the leader who puts their own comfort above the well-being of their people. They are the individual who sees the world not as a shared home, but as a collection of things to be owned. In their hearts, that same shard of ice begins to form. Their insatiable desire for more mirrors the Wendigo's physical hunger. They are starving their own spirit, and in doing so, they become a vessel for the monster. This is what makes the Wendigo such a terrifying and enduring figure. It's not just a boogeyman in the woods, it's a moral warning, a cautionary tale that the monster you should fear most is the one that can grow inside anyone who lets greed devour their soul. This transformation, whether born of cannibalism or avarice, was considered so real that it gave rise to a recognized condition, a culture-bound syndrome known to early ethnographers and psychiatrists as Wendigo psychosis. This wasn't just folklore. It was a documented affliction. People, typically those isolated during harsh winters, would begin to exhibit terrifying symptoms. It started with a deep, melancholic depression and a loss of appetite for normal food. Then came the anxiety, the paranoia, and the growing obsessive belief that they were turning into a Wendigo. The most horrifying symptom was the intense, overwhelming craving for human flesh. They were conscious of what was happening. They could feel the monster taking root inside them. They would plead with their families to restrain them, to stop them from committing the horrible acts their new instincts were screaming for. They were, in essence, a passenger in their own body as it was being hijacked by an ancient, malevolent force. And sometimes the fight was lost. The most infamous and well-documented case is that of a man named Swift Runner. He was a Plains Cree trapper and guide for the Northwest Mounted Police in what is now Alberta, Canada. He was well-respected, trusted, and known to be a good family man. In the winter of 1878, he, his wife, their 6 children, his mother-in-law, and his brother took shelter in the wilderness, miles from the nearest trading post. When spring came, Swift Runner emerged from the forest alone. He looked gaunt and haunted. He made his way back to the local Catholic mission, claiming his entire family had starved to death. It was a tragic story, and at first it was believed. A harsh winter could easily claim a whole family, but his story had inconsistencies, and his own behavior was erratic, plagued by nightmares that made him scream in his sleep. His wife's family grew suspicious. Why was he, an experienced hunter, the only one to survive? The authorities were alerted, and the Mounties, who knew Swift Runner, went back with him to his winter camp to investigate. What they found was a scene of unimaginable horror. The camp was not empty. It was a slaughterhouse. Human bones were scattered everywhere. Many of them cracked open, the marrow scraped out. A small cooking pot still held rendered human fat. The bodies of his wife and children had been butchered and consumed. Swift Runner, the respected guide, had not watched his family starve. He had eaten them. When confronted, he confessed to everything. But his confession came with a chilling explanation. He said he hadn't acted alone. He claimed he had been possessed by the spirit of a Wendigo. It had driven him mad with hunger, he said, forcing him to kill and devour his own family, one by one. According to his testimony, it began with his eldest son. After the boy died of starvation, Swift Runner consumed him. But that act, that crossing of the line, broke something inside him. The Wendigo spirit, he claimed, took hold. He was no longer a grieving father but a predator. He then hunted the rest of his family, who were terrified and trying to flee from the man who was once their protector. He was tried for murder. He pleaded guilty, never wavering from his story that a Wendigo was to blame. In December of 1879, Swift Runner was hanged. His case became a landmark, a terrifying real-world example of the Wendigo legend leaping from campfire stories into the blood-soaked snow of the historical record. So, is it a possession? A psychological break? A desperate justification for a monstrous act? The lore suggests it's all of them at once. The transformation isn't a simple switch. It's a process. The human is still in there, at least for a while. They are the ones who feel the ice spreading through their veins. They are the ones who hear the new guttural voice in their head that whispers of an endless, agonizing hunger. They feel their own limbs begin to stretch and contort, their skin pulling taut over a rapidly elongating skeleton. Their lips are chewed away by their own chattering teeth, leaving a bloody, lipless grin. Their eyes, once human, sink back into their sockets, glowing with a cold, predatory light. The man or woman they once were becomes a prisoner in a body that is no longer their own. They are trapped behind the eyes of a beast, forced to watch as it uses their hands to commit unspeakable acts. They are a silent, screaming witness to their own damnation. The change is both physical and spiritual, a rotting from the inside out. By the time the transformation is complete, there is very little of the original person left. What remains is a hollow shell, animated by an ancient spirit of winter and famine. A tall, emaciated creature of impossible speed and strength, driven by nothing but an eternal ravenous hunger that can never, ever be filled. The monster is now fully born. An abomination of nature, it stalks the frozen woods, a constant reminder of what happens when human desire is left unchecked. But what does it do now? How does this creature hunt? How does it think? And who, in the face of such a terrifying foe, would be brave enough or foolish enough to try and hunt it back? To understand how the Wendigo hunts is to understand the nature of true psychological terror. This is not a bear that mauls, or a wolf that rips and tears. The Wendigo is a predator of the mind first, and the body second. It is a patient, calculating evil, born of the lonely, silent cold of the northern woods. Its hunt doesn't begin with a chase. It begins with a whisper. Imagine you're lost. The sun has fallen below the jagged line of spruce trees, and the temperature is plummeting. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of frozen leaves, sends a jolt of adrenaline through you. You call out, your voice swallowed by the immense, indifferent wilderness. And then you hear it. A voice answers back. Sounds familiar, frighteningly familiar. It might be the voice of your mother, your child, or a friend you were separated from. It's calling your name, its tone laced with panic, begging you to come and help. Your heart leaps. Relief floods your veins. You run towards the sound, crashing through the underbrush, desperate for safety, for a familiar face. But the voice always seems to be just a little further ahead, drawing you deeper and deeper into the forest, away from any path, away from any hope of rescue. This is the Wendigo's favorite trick. It is a master of mimicry, a ventriloquist of the damned, using your own love and compassion as a lure. It turns your best instincts into a fatal weakness. If it doesn't use a lure, it uses your own fear as its primary weapon. The hunt can last for days. It will stalk you, always staying just at the edge of your vision. You'll catch a glimpse of something impossibly tall and gaunt moving between the trees, so fast you question if you saw it at all. You'll hear a high-pitched, unearthly shriek on the wind that sounds like nothing you've ever heard before. At night, as you huddle by a meager fire, you'll hear your name whispered from the oppressive darkness just beyond the firelight. It wants you to be afraid. It wants you to exhaust yourself, running from shadows, jumping at every sound. It feeds on your terror, savoring it, letting it marinate your flesh before the final attack. The paranoia becomes overwhelming. You start to see it everywhere. Every gaunt, skeletal tree starts to look like its emaciated limbs. Every gust of wind sounds like its chilling whisper. It drives its prey to the brink of insanity, because a mind fractured by fear is a mind that can no longer fight back. The creature itself is a specter of silent speed. Despite its size, it moves through the densest forest without making a sound. It is often described as moving like the wind, a blur of motion that is there one moment and gone the next. You don't hear it coming. The only warning might be a sudden, overpowering stench, the smell of rotting meat, of a freshly opened grave, a foul miasma that clings to the air. By the time you smell it, it's already too late. It descends upon its victim with the speed of a blizzard, its long, jagged claws tearing through flesh and its yellowed fangs ready to feast. It is a whirlwind of violence, a final, brutal end to days of psychological torment. So, in the face of this perfect predator, this supernatural engine of hunger and terror, who would dare to fight back? Who has the knowledge, the courage, the spiritual fortitude to face such an abomination and not become a victim, or worse, become another monster? The answer is the Wendigo hunter. These are not ordinary men. They are not sportsmen looking for a trophy. Wendigo hunters, in the traditional lore, are shamans, medicine people, or warriors of immense spiritual power. They understand that a Wendigo is not just an animal to be shot. It is a spiritual corruption, a sickness of the soul given physical form. To hunt it, one cannot rely on brute force alone. This is a battle of will, of spirit, of purity against defilement. The preparation for the hunt is as important as the hunt itself. The hunter must undergo rigorous purification rituals. They might fast for days, pray, and enter a sweat lodge to cleanse both their body and their spirit. They must be completely free of the very emotions the Wendigo represents: greed, selfishness, and excessive desire. Any trace of these feelings in the hunter's own heart is a weakness the Wendigo can exploit. It can turn their own inner darkness against them. The hunter must become a vessel of pure intention, their mind a fortress, their spirit a sharpened blade. Their tools are not just weapons, they are sacred instruments. While a rifle might be carried, the true weapons against a Wendigo are things of spiritual significance. The most famous of these is silver. A silver bullet, a silver blade. The metal's purity is believed to be anathema to the Wendigo's corruption. But it's not a magic cure-all. The silver must be blessed, prepared with ceremony, and wielded by a hand that is steady and a heart that is clean. Another crucial element is fire. Fire is the ultimate purifier, the one thing that can truly destroy the evil that animates the creature. The hunt itself is a deadly game of cat and mouse, where both parties are simultaneously the hunter and the hunted. The shaman tracks the Wendigo using ancient knowledge of the forest, reading signs that an ordinary person would never see. A tree limb bent in an unnatural way, a strange silence where there should be the sounds of wildlife, the faint lingering smell of death on the breeze. All the while, the Wendigo is aware of its pursuer. It will use all its tricks, all its cunning to turn the tables. It will mimic the hunter's family. It will whisper temptations and doubts into their mind. It will try to find a crack in their spiritual armor. The hunter must resist these psychological assaults, holding fast to their purpose, their mind focused and clear. The confrontation is never simple. It is a brutal, desperate struggle. The Wendigo is unnaturally strong, impossibly fast, and feels no pain. It is a being of pure, frenzied rage. The hunter must be smarter, faster, and more resolute. They must use their knowledge of the land, setting traps, using the terrain to their advantage, waiting for the one perfect moment to strike. But even a silver bullet to the brain or a silver knife to the throat might not be enough to kill it. The true source of its power, the seat of its insatiable hunger, is its heart. According to the lore, the Wendigo's heart is not made of flesh and blood, but of pure solid ice. Even if the body is destroyed, as long as the heart remains intact, the spirit can eventually reform and rise again. The final, most critical act of the hunt takes place after the creature's body has fallen. The hunter must perform a dangerous ritual. They must carve into the chest of the monster and remove the block of ice that serves as its heart. This is a perilous moment. The spirit is at its most malevolent, its rage focused entirely on the one who defeated it. The hunter must then build a great fire, a sacred fire, and melt the heart completely until not a single shard of ice remains. Only when the heart is reduced to water and steam, its cold essence utterly consumed by the cleansing flames, is the Wendigo truly and finally destroyed. Only then is the land free from its shadow. The hunter had won. The body was destroyed, the heart was ash. The village was safe. Or so they thought. But they had only killed the flesh. They hadn't killed the hunger. And hunger is an idea that can spread like a plague, infecting not the body but the mind. What happens when the monster isn't in the woods, but inside your neighbor's head? This is the most terrifying part of the legend, because a monster with claws and antlers can be fought. It can be seen. But a monster that looks just like your friend, your brother, your father, that's a different kind of horror. That's a terror that seeps under your door and settles into your home, right at your own dinner table. This is where the Wendigo transitions from a creature of folklore to a documented and fiercely debated psychological condition. A culture-bound syndrome that for centuries was known to the Algonquin peoples, and later recorded by Jesuit missionaries, traders, and eventually Western doctors as Wendigo psychosis. Imagine this. It begins not with a roar in the night, but with a profound sadness, a deep, unshakable melancholy that settles over a person like a winter shroud. They become withdrawn, brooding. They lose their appetite for normal food. The very sight of smoked fish or roasted venison, staples of life, now fills them with disgust. They complain of nausea. They complain of a strange, creeping fear that they are being possessed by an evil spirit. This is the first stage. It's the quiet before the storm. Then the obsession begins. They start seeing human beings not as family or friends but as food. They develop an overwhelming pathological craving for human flesh. It's a hunger so intense it eclipses every other thought, every memory of love or kinship. They become convinced that the only way to satisfy this gnawing emptiness inside them is to commit the ultimate taboo. In their minds, they are already transforming. Their heart is becoming a shard of ice. They are becoming a Wendigo. And in the final terrifying stages, they act on it. They become violent, homicidal, driven by this singular monstrous need. This wasn't just a story told around a campfire. For many, it was a terrifyingly real diagnosis. And there is no more infamous or tragic case than that of Swift Runner. Swift Runner was not a monster to begin with. He was a man, a Plains Cree trapper, well respected by his people and by the traders at the Hudson's Bay Company. He was tall, strong, a skilled hunter who knew the unforgiving wilderness of what is now central Alberta. And he had a family, a wife, 6 children, his mother-in-law, and a brother. In the fall of 1878, he led them deep into the forest for the winter trapping season. It was a journey from which he alone would return. When spring thawed the land, Swift Runner appeared back at the Catholic mission in St. Albert, looking gaunt and haunted. He told a terrible story. The winter had been unusually harsh. The game had vanished. One by one, his family had starved to death, leaving him the sole, tragic survivor. It was a plausible story. Starvation was a constant threat in the north. But there was something wrong. People who knew Swift Runner, who knew his skill as a hunter, were suspicious. More than that, he seemed agitated. He was plagued by terrible nightmares. He would wake up screaming, talking of evil spirits that had haunted his camp all winter. His story began to unravel when his wife's brother grew suspicious and went to the authorities. The Northwest Mounted Police, the precursor to the famous Mounties, decided to investigate. They took Swift Runner as their guide, forcing him to lead them back to his winter camp. And there they found the horror. The camp was not a scene of quiet starvation. It was a slaughterhouse. The small cabin was littered with human bones, picked clean of flesh. A small cooking pot near the fire pit held the rendered fat of a human child. There were no signs of a struggle with an animal, no signs of sickness. There were only the clear, unmistakable signs of butchery and cannibalism. Swift Runner, the sole survivor, was suspiciously well fed. Under questioning, the full depraved story came out. He confessed. He had not watched his family starve. He had killed them. He had murdered and eaten all 8 members of his family, one by one, to survive the winter. He started with his eldest son, then his mother-in-law, then his brother, his wife, and finally his own small children. But his confession came with a chilling explanation. He claimed he hadn't acted alone. He said he was possessed. A Wendigo spirit had entered his mind, twisting his love for his family into an insatiable, ravenous hunger. He wasn't just a man who had broken a taboo out of desperation. He believed he had become the monster itself. Swift Runner was put on trial at Fort Saskatchewan. It was one of the first legal cases in the Canadian West to deal directly with the Wendigo belief. Was he a cold-blooded murderer using a cultural belief as an excuse? Or was he a victim of a genuine psychological breakdown? A psychosis so profound that he truly believed he was a monster? The court didn't care about the distinction. They saw a man who had confessed to killing and eating 8 people. He was found guilty and sentenced to hang. On a cold December morning in 1879, Swift Runner met his end. But the story of the Wendigo, and the terror it represented, was far from over. Because if Swift Runner was the disease, there were others who claimed to be the cure. Enter Jack Fiddler. His story is the other side of the same dark coin. Jack Fiddler was an Ojibwe shaman, a spiritual leader from the Sucker people in northern Ontario. And he had a very specific, very grim job. He was a Wendigo hunter. For decades, when someone in the remote northern communities began to show the signs, the deep melancholy, the refusal of food, the dark talk of craving human flesh, Jack Fiddler was the man they called. He was a respected elder, believed to possess great spiritual power necessary to confront this specific evil. His methods were not about tracking a monster through the woods. He was confronting the monster inside a person. He would perform rituals, attempt to spiritually cure the afflicted. But if the Wendigo fever progressed too far, if the person was deemed beyond saving and a threat to the community, Fiddler would perform a final, terrible duty. He would kill them. In his view, and in the view of his community, this was not murder. It was a mercy killing, a form of spiritual euthanasia. He was releasing the human from the monster that had taken root in their soul, and more importantly, he was protecting the rest of the tribe from a cannibalistic rampage. He claimed to have successfully defeated 14 Wendigos in his lifetime. Most of them, he said, had asked him to kill them before the hunger took over completely. But Fiddler World was colliding with another. The Canadian government was extending its reach, its laws, and its understanding of justice into these remote territories. And their law had no room for Wendigo spirits or shamanic executioners. In 1907, Jack Fiddler, now an old man, and his brother Joseph were arrested by the Northwest Mounted Police and charged with murder. The trial was a tragic clash of cultures. Fiddler couldn't comprehend the charges. He tried to explain through a translator that he had done nothing wrong. He was a protector of his people. He was killing an evil spirit, not a human being. The person was already gone, replaced by the icy heart of the Wendigo. How could these white men not understand the danger? To the Canadian court, his testimony was a confession to a series of ritualistic killings. They saw him as a serial murderer, the leader of a cannibal cult. They saw his traditions as superstition and his sacred duty as a crime. Before a verdict could be reached, Jack Fiddler, held in custody and separated from the land and the people he had spent his life protecting, escaped one night. He walked a short distance from the prison and hanged himself. He chose his own end rather than submit to a foreign law that had declared his entire worldview, his entire life's work, to be evil. The stories of Swift Runner and Jack Fiddler are like two pillars holding up the grim reality of the Wendigo belief. One represents the terrifying affliction, the man who becomes the monster. The other represents the terrible cure, the man who must kill his own people to save them. These aren't just myths. These are documented histories of how a belief in a monster could drive one man to cannibalism and another to kill in the name of salvation. It proves that for centuries, the Wendigo wasn't just a story you told your kids to make them behave. It was a force that shaped communities, a diagnosis for a real-world terror, and a matter of life and death. The psychosis may have been rare, but the fear of it was universal. But here's the question that lingers, long after the execution of Swift Runner and the death of Jack Fiddler. Has the Wendigo really gone away? Or has it just learned to hide better? Perhaps the spirit of insatiable hunger didn't die in the 19th century. Perhaps it just evolved. It evolved because its environment did. The deep, unforgiving forests of the 19th century gave way to a new kind of wilderness. A wilderness of steel, glass, and digital noise. The hunger for survival in a brutal winter was replaced by a different kind of hunger. A modern hunger. A hunger not born of empty bellies but of empty souls. The Wendigo, the spirit of insatiable greed, found that it no longer needed to stalk starving trappers in the snow. It could now stalk the halls of power, the trading floors of Wall Street, the endless scrolling feeds of social media. The new forests are made of concrete and glass, and the coldest winters are the ones we feel in our hearts. The spirit of more found its perfect host in a society built on the principle of perpetual growth and endless consumption. Why possess a single desperate man when you could infect an entire culture? The hunger for human flesh is a finite thing, but the hunger for wealth, for power, for fame, for the next dopamine hit from a tiny glowing screen, that hunger is infinite. The Wendigo didn't die. It went corporate, put on a suit. It learned to speak in quarterly earnings reports and market projections. It became the ghost in the machine of modern capitalism, the whisper in our ear that tells us what we have is never ever enough. The emaciated creature with a heart of ice now had a new face, the smiling, soulless face of unchecked ambition. But as the spirit of the Wendigo was adapting to its new hunting grounds, its physical form was undergoing a bizarre transformation in our collective imagination. The original creature of Algonquin lore, the gaunt, terrifyingly human-like giant, its skin stretched taut over its bones, began to fade. It was replaced by something else, something with antlers. This metamorphosis didn't happen overnight. It began subtly, with the first attempts by outsiders to capture this uniquely North American horror on paper. In 1910, the English author Algernon Blackwood published a novella simply titled The Wendigo. It's a masterpiece of atmospheric horror, focusing on a group of hunters in the Canadian wilderness. Blackwood masterfully captures the psychological dread, the sheer terror of being pursued by something vast, ancient, and utterly indifferent to human life. He describes it as a towering, vague shape that moves with the wind, leaving burning tracks in the snow and crying out a name on the wind. But in translating the creature for a European audience, Blackwood also began the process of stripping it of its specific cultural context. His Wendigo is less a spirit of cannibalism and greed, and more a genius loci, a spirit of the place itself. It's the personification of the terrifying emptiness of the North Woods, what he called the call of the wild, twisted into a malevolent siren song. He focused on the madness, the Wendigo psychosis, but diluted the core reason for it, the taboo of consuming another human. Blackwood opened the door for the Wendigo to enter the global consciousness, but in doing so, he left its cultural heart behind. Decades later, another master of horror would push that door wide open: Stephen King. In his 1983 novel, Pet Sematary, the Wendigo isn't a transformed human, but a primordial demonic entity that has poisoned the land of the Mi'kmaq people for eons. It's the power that animates the burial ground, the force that brings the dead back. Wrong. King's Wendigo is a source of evil, not a result of it. It's a puppet master, pulling the strings of grief and tempting people to break the ultimate laws of nature. This was a monumental shift. The Wendigo was no longer a cautionary tale about human weakness. It was now an ancient satanic beast, a figure of pure cosmic evil. And because Stephen King is Stephen King, this interpretation became massively influential, cementing the Wendigo in the minds of millions as a capital E evil entity. But neither Blackwood nor King gave the Wendigo its most famous modern feature: the deer skull, the antlers. Where did that come from? The answer lies not in ancient lore but in Hollywood. For filmmakers, a gaunt, naked human, even a giant one, can be difficult to make visually distinct and terrifying on screen. They needed a monster, an icon, and they found it by grafting the imagery of the deer and the stag, symbols of the forest, of nature, and in some European folklore, of wild, untamed spirits, onto the Wendigo. The 1999 film Ravenous hinted at this, connecting the Wendigo myth to a story of cannibalism and supernatural strength in the American frontier. But it was the 2015 video game Until Dawn that truly solidified the new image. The game's Wendigos are fast, screeching, skeletal monsters with a distinctly deer-like silhouette. They are terrifying, and for an entire generation of gamers, this became the definitive look. Then movies like Antlers, produced by the creature feature maestro Guillermo del Toro, took this visual and ran with it, presenting a towering, majestic, and horrifying beast with a massive rack of antlers, a creature that looked more like a forest god from Celtic myth than anything described in Ojibwe or Cree stories. This new image is undeniably scary. It's powerful. It's marketable. But it is not the Wendigo. It's a hybrid, a chimera created by pop culture. It conflates the creature with the skinwalker of Navajo lore, with the European Cernunnos or Herne the Hunter, the antlers, the deer skull. These elements have absolutely no basis in the original legends. They were added because they looked cool. They looked monstrous. And from there, the internet took over. The deer skull Wendigo became a superstar of creepypasta, the online folklore of the 21st century. It became a stock monster, a generic thing in the woods that you could slot into any scary story. It was drawn, animated, and memed into a form that was completely divorced from its origins. The tragic figure of the human, twisted by starvation and greed into a monster, was gone. The profound cultural warning about community, restraint, and the darkness that lies within the human heart was erased. In its place stood a cool-looking monster with a deer head, a monster perfect for a thumbnail, perfect for a jump scare. The evolution was complete. The Wendigo had been colonized, repackaged, and sold back to us stripped of its meaning. It became a brand. But in this transformation, in this effort to make the creature more visually horrifying, did we lose what made it truly terrifying? The original Wendigo was scary not because it had claws or antlers, but because it was once human. It was scary because it was a reflection of our own potential for monstrousness. It was a mirror. By replacing that mirror with a monster mask, Have we made ourselves safer? Or have we just made it easier to ignore the warning it was trying to give us? In our desperate attempt to define the monster in the woods, we forgot that the most dangerous part of the Wendigo legend was never what it looked like, but what it represented: the terrifying, insatiable hunger that lives inside of us all. This internal hunger wasn't just a metaphor. For many Algonquian-speaking peoples, it was a recognized spiritual and psychological affliction, a genuine pathology. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Western anthropologists and psychologists who studied these cultures even gave it a name: Wendigo psychosis. It was classified as a culture-bound syndrome, a mental condition specific to a particular society. The symptoms were terrifyingly specific. It would often begin with a period of deep melancholy and social withdrawal. The afflicted person would stop eating, claiming that all food tasted like ash or decaying flesh. They would become obsessed with the idea of human meat, often having vivid, disturbing dreams of cannibalism. They would complain of a profound, unnatural coldness spreading from their core, a feeling that their very heart was turning to ice. To the community, these were not the signs of simple madness. They were the unmistakable symptoms of a spiritual transformation, the gradual, horrifying process of a human being becoming a Wendigo. And they had a protocol for it. This wasn't a monster you just hunted with spears and arrows. This was a disease you tried to cure. The first line of defense was the family and the community. They would surround the afflicted, keeping them warm, trying to coax them to eat normal food, reminding them of their human connections, of their love, of their place in the tribe. They would try to talk them back from the brink. If that failed, a spiritual healer, a shaman, would be called in. The treatment was as intense and visceral as the affliction itself. The goal was to combat the icy heart of the Wendigo. According to some accounts, the healer would force-feed the patient hot animal fat or tallow, often bear grease, a substance believed to hold great spiritual power and heat. The idea was to literally melt the sliver of ice that was forming in the person's soul before it could consume them entirely. They would perform ceremonies, sing songs of healing, and engage in a spiritual battle to exorcise the ravenous spirit that had taken root. Sometimes it worked. The person would break their feverish state, the unnatural cold would recede, and they would return to their family, shaken but human. But sometimes it didn't. There was a point of no return, a moment when the community looked into the eyes of their loved one, their brother, their wife, their child, and saw nothing human looking back. They saw only the hollow, bottomless hunger of the Wendigo. The pupils would be dilated, the skin pale and cold to the touch. The person would no longer recognize their family as kin, but as prey. At that point, the most terrible decision had to be made. The person they knew was already gone, replaced by a monster that would, if left unchecked, consume the entire community. For the safety of the tribe, the Wendigo had to be destroyed. This often meant a preemptive execution, a mercy killing that was also an act of communal self-defense. It was a tragedy of the highest order, a choice no one ever wanted to make, but one the lore deemed absolutely necessary. You might think this is all just folklore, a grim fairy tale told to scare children and enforce social taboos. But in the winter of 1878, in the frozen wilderness of what is now Alberta, Canada, this story clawed its way out of myth and into the pages of history. The man's name was Swift Runner. He was a Plains Cree hunter and trapper, well known and respected by his people and by the traders at the local Hudson's Bay Company post. He was a big man, strong, and a skilled provider for his large family, a wife, a mother-in-law, and 6 children. That fall, he led his family deep into the forest for the winter trapping season, far from any other settlement. It was a brutal winter. The snows came early and heavy, and the game all but vanished. As spring arrived, Swift Runner emerged from the wilderness alone. He stumbled into the Catholic mission at St. Albert, looking gaunt and haunted. He told a terrible story. He said his wife had died of sickness, and his children and mother-in-law had all starved to death one by one. It was a tragic, but not an entirely unbelievable story. Starvation was a constant threat in the unforgiving North. But things didn't add up. Swift Runner, a master hunter, seemed to be in relatively good health for a man who claimed his entire family had starved. And his grief seemed off. He was agitated, prone to screaming nightmares. His own people began to whisper. They said he was possessed, that the spirit of a Wendigo had taken him during the long, hungry winter. The authorities of the Northwest Mounted Police became suspicious. They sent officers to investigate his winter camp. What they found there was a scene of unimaginable horror. The camp was not empty. It was littered with human bones, picked clean of all flesh. Skulls had been broken open, the brains scooped out. The small bones of his children were scattered around the campfire. It was clear this was no case of starvation. This was a massacre. Swift Runner was arrested, and under interrogation he confessed to everything. He admitted that, driven by a hunger that went beyond mere starvation, he had killed and eaten his entire family. He started with his eldest son. He described the acts in chilling, methodical detail, showing no remorse, only a strange sort of detachment, as if another being had been in control of his body. His trial was a sensation. But for the Cree people who testified, it wasn't a trial for murder. They were testifying against a Wendigo. They explained to the Canadian court that Swift Runner was no longer the man they knew. He had succumbed to the ancient curse, the insatiable hunger. He had committed the ultimate taboo and transformed into the monster of their oldest stories. Swift Runner himself seemed to agree. He claimed he'd been haunted by a spirit that demanded he eat human flesh, a craving that became an obsession he couldn't fight. In the end, he was found guilty of murder and cannibalism. On December 20, 1879, Swift Runner was hanged at Fort Saskatchewan. It was one of the first legal executions in the territory. But the story doesn't end with a rope. The case of Swift Runner stands as a terrifying bridge between two worlds. For the Canadian legal system, it was a straightforward, albeit gruesome, criminal case. A man who broke under pressure and committed unspeakable acts. But for the Cree, it was proof. It was the horrifying confirmation that their legends were real, that the Wendigo was not just a story to tell around the fire, but a real and present danger, a spiritual sickness that could take root in the heart of a good man and turn him into a monster. It raises a chilling question. Was Swift Runner simply a desperate man driven mad by starvation and isolation? Or was he the victim of something older, something darker? A malevolent spirit that the modern world, with its tidy labels of psychosis and criminality, simply no longer has the language to describe? The horror of the Wendigo isn't just that it exists in the woods, but that it can exist inside a person you know and love, waiting for a moment of weakness, for the hunger to take over. And Swift Runner's story suggests that sometimes the hunger wins. This transformation from respected provider to monstrous pariah led many early ethnographers and psychologists to coin a term, Wendigo psychosis. It was classified as a culture-bound syndrome, a mental illness supposedly unique to the Algonquin peoples. The diagnosis described a progression of symptoms. First, a deep, melancholic depression and a loss of appetite. Then, a growing obsession with the idea of cannibalism and the delusional belief that one was transforming into a Wendigo. The final terrifying stage was an overwhelming compulsion to eat human flesh. For decades, this was the accepted scientific explanation. It was a neat, tidy box to put these terrifying stories in. It took the spirit, the ancient evil, and reduced it to a malfunction of the brain, a mere product of starvation and isolation in a harsh environment. But this diagnosis is now almost entirely discredited. Modern scholars and, more importantly, indigenous leaders themselves have pointed out a massive flaw in this theory. The concept of Wendigo psychosis was created almost exclusively by outsiders looking in. It was a colonial interpretation, an attempt to pathologize a deeply complex cultural belief system and moral code. The Wendigo was never just a mental illness. It was a reality, a spiritual reality. It was a warning, a cautionary tale made manifest, a way to enforce taboos and reinforce the importance of community and sharing in the face of scarcity. To call it a psychosis was to misunderstand its very purpose. It was like calling the concept of demonic possession a simple possession psychosis. It misses the entire spiritual and cultural framework that gives the entity its power. The horror of the Wendigo isn't a bug in the human software. It's a feature of a world where spiritual forces are real, and where human greed can invite them in. This distinction is crucial, because as the Wendigo legend began to seep out of the northern forests and into the wider world, it was the psychosis angle, the man-turned-monster idea, that took root in the imagination of Western horror writers. And perhaps no one was more influential in shaping the modern image of the Wendigo than the English author Algernon Blackwood. In his 1910 short story simply titled The Wendigo, Blackwood took the core elements of the myth and twisted them into something new. His creature was less a gaunt, human-like cannibal and more an elemental spirit of the wilderness itself. It was a vast, terrifying presence that moved with the wind, a being of immense speed and power that snatched people from their campsites and dragged them screaming into the sky. Blackwood's Wendigo induced a form of madness, a spiritual sickness that made its victims sprout claws and crave to run wild with it through the treetops. He captured the terror of the North Woods, the feeling of being small and insignificant in the face of an ancient, indifferent nature. He made the Wendigo a metaphor for the terrifying call of the wild, the primal urge to abandon civilization and become something else. And with that story, the floodgates opened. The Wendigo had been untethered from its cultural roots and set loose upon the landscape of popular culture. And it began to change. It became a stock monster, a go-to creature for any story set in the spooky, isolated woods. But one author, more than any other, would take Blackwood's atmospheric dread and fuse it back with the original myth's corrupting influence. That author was Stephen King. In his novel Pet Sematary, the Wendigo isn't a creature you fight with a silver bullet. It's not even something you truly see. It's a vast, ancient and malevolent spirit that has soured the ground of the Micmac burial site. It's a whisper on the wind that encourages the worst in human nature: our grief, our selfishness, our inability to let go. The Wendigo in Pet Sematary is the force that tempts Louis Creed to break the ultimate taboo, not just of cannibalism, but of death itself. It offers a shortcut past grief, a way to have what you want, but the price is a perversion of nature, a soulless mockery of what was once loved. King understood that the true horror of the Wendigo wasn't its claws or its fangs, but its voice, the one that tells you it's okay to do the unthinkable, to satisfy your own desperate hunger at any cost. This idea of the Wendigo as a transformative curse, one passed through an act of evil, became the blueprint for its most famous modern incarnation, in the 2015 video game Until Dawn. For millions of players, this was their first real introduction to the legend. The game's creators did their homework. They directly incorporated the core tenets of the lore: a group of people stranded on a remote, snow-covered mountain, a terrible incident in the past involving starvation and cannibalism, and the result: monstrous, pale, unnaturally fast creatures that hunt by sound and can only be killed by fire. The game's Wendigos are the direct result of miners who were trapped and resorted to eating each other. The spirit of the mountain, a vengeful Wendigo, cursed them, turning them into eternal, ravenous hunters. The game brilliantly weaponizes the myth's rules. The only way to survive is to stay perfectly still, to control your fear, because the Wendigo represents the loss of all control, a being driven by nothing but pure, insatiable impulse. From there, the Wendigo became a horror superstar. It appeared in the show Supernatural as a gaunt, super-fast hunter that hibernates for decades between feedings. The film Antlers, produced by Guillermo del Toro, brought the creature back to its roots as a terrifying metaphor, connecting the spirit's emergence to environmental destruction, poverty, and the hidden horrors of abuse within a family. In each of these versions, the details shift. Sometimes it has antlers, a popular addition that likely comes from its association with deer and the deep woods, though it's largely absent from the original folklore. Sometimes it's a physical beast. Other times it's a disembodied spirit. But the core concept, the terrifying heart of the myth, remains the same. The Wendigo is what happens when humanity is stripped away. It is the embodiment of hunger that can never be filled. And maybe that's why it terrifies us so much today, even more than it did the people who first told its stories around a flickering fire. We live in a world of insatiable hunger, a culture of endless consumption. We are constantly told to want more, to buy more, to have more. We devour natural resources at a terrifying rate, clearing forests, poisoning rivers, melting the very ice that was the Wendigo's domain. We are addicted to the new, the next, the immediate, a constant, gnawing hunger for stimulation that leaves us feeling empty. The Wendigo is no longer just a spirit of the northern forests. It has become the perfect monster for the modern age. It is the patron spirit of unchecked greed, of a society so hungry for everything that it risks consuming itself. The stories warn that when a person consumes the flesh of another, they become a monster. But what happens when an entire culture is built on a foundation of endless, rapacious consumption? What kind of monster do we become then? The terror of the Wendigo is the terror of looking in the mirror and seeing the flicker of its icy eyes staring back, recognizing its bottomless hunger as our own. This hunger, once a specter of the frozen north, now walks among us in broad daylight, cloaked in the mundane. It's the phantom limb of a society severed from its own sense of enough. We've built an entire world on the premise of the Wendigo's curse. That satisfaction is always just one more purchase, one more upgrade, one more click away. Think of the ravenous crowds on Black Friday, trampling each other for a discounted television. Is that not the spirit of the Wendigo, a madness that devours human decency for the sake of possession? We are encouraged from birth to be hungry for success, for wealth, for status. But the myth warns us what happens when that hunger is untethered from community, from reciprocity, from balance. It becomes a gnawing void that can never be filled. This modern Wendigo doesn't stalk the snowy woods. It stalks the stock market. It's the insatiable drive for quarterly growth, a corporate entity that, like the monster, is legally obligated to prioritize its own self-interest, its own hunger for profit, above all else. Above the well-being of its employees, the health of the communities it operates in, and the future of the planet it strips bare. It clear-cuts forests, poisons rivers, and displaces populations, all to feed an abstract number on a spreadsheet. It is a disembodied greed, a system that transforms human beings into resources to be consumed and discarded. The company that shutters a factory, devastating a town to add a fraction of a percentage to its profit margin, is enacting the Wendigo's cold, unfeeling logic. It has devoured the heart of a community to feed its own endless growth, leaving behind a hollowed-out shell, a ghost of what once was. The parallels become even more chilling when we look at our relationship with the earth itself. The Wendigo is a spirit of winter, its curse born from the desperation of a world locked in ice, where resources are scarce. The legend is a stark reminder of what happens when a society consumes more than the land can provide. And what are we doing now on a global scale? We are consuming the planet's finite resources with a frantic, desperate energy, burning through millennia of stored sunlight in the form of fossil fuels. We are creating our own long artificial winter. Climate change, with its extreme weather, its famines and its droughts, is the shadow of the Wendigo falling across the entire globe. We are the starving party in the wilderness, and in our desperation, we have begun to consume the very vessel that keeps us alive. The ice caps are melting, the forests are burning, and the oceans are acidifying. The earth is groaning under the weight of our bottomless appetite, and the monster we were warned about is no longer a myth. It is the headline on the evening news. And this spirit, this psychosis, doesn't just operate on a grand societal scale. It burrows into the individual's soul. It's the addiction that whispers you need just one more hit, one more drink, one more bet to feel whole, all while it devours your health, your relationships, your life. It's the toxic ambition that drives a person to betray friends and compromise their own morality for a step up the ladder, only to find the top just as empty as the bottom. It's the gnawing insecurity fueled by social media, a constant, desperate hunger for validation, for likes and shares, consuming our time and our mental health in exchange for a fleeting sense of worth. We scroll through curated lives, feeling our own inadequacy grow, a hunger for something we can't even name. Each of these is a small echo of the Wendigo's curse, a hunger that, in the act of feeding, only makes itself stronger and more desolate. We isolate ourselves, just as the Wendigo is doomed to wander alone, because its hunger makes genuine connection impossible. It can only see others as something to be consumed. But the stories of the Wendigo are not just tales of horror. They are stories of warning, and within every warning there is a lesson. There is an antidote. If the Wendigo is born from greed, isolation, and imbalance, its cure is found in the opposite: generosity, community, and harmony. The indigenous cultures that told these stories understood this deeply. Their societies were built on principles of reciprocity, of giving back to the community and to the earth what you take. Wealth was not measured by what you hoarded, but by what you could give away. The greatest leaders were not those who accumulated the most, but those who provided for the most. This is the ultimate defense against the Wendigo spirit. It cannot take root in a heart that is focused on the well-being of the whole. It starves in the presence of compassion. It withers in the light of shared strength. To fight the Wendigo is to choose to be a steward, not a consumer. It is to ask, what is my responsibility? Instead of what can I get? It is to find wealth in relationships, not possessions. It is to understand that we are part of a vast, interconnected web of life, and that to harm any part of that web is to ultimately harm ourselves. It requires a radical shift in perspective, a conscious rejection of the cultural programming that tells us we are empty and can only be filled by taking more. It is the practice of gratitude. It is the act of sharing. It is the courage to say, I have enough. The Wendigo is not a relic of a forgotten time. It is an eternal aspect of the human condition, a cautionary shadow that walks beside us. It is the embodiment of the terrifying truth that the greatest monsters are not those that hunt us from the outside, but those we cultivate within. The ancient tales were never just about a creature of sticks and ice and antlers. They were about us, about our capacity for monstrousness when we lose our way, when we forget our connection to each other and to the world. The Wendigo is the abyss that stares back when we let our hunger consume our humanity. So the legend endures, whispered on the winter wind, not just as a ghost story to frighten children, but as a vital piece of wisdom for our modern age. It serves as a mirror, forcing us to confront the dark potential that lies dormant in every human heart. The call of the Wendigo is the siren song of more, the lie that we are separate and alone, and that our survival depends on the consumption of others. The real horror is not that it exists, but that we are so often tempted to answer its call. The forests of North America may be quieter now, the old fears supplanted by new ones. But the wind that blows through the skeletal trees still whispers its name. The question is not whether the Wendigo is real. The question is, when you feel that cold, gnawing emptiness inside, what do you choose to feed?